Commander Vexler stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the stars drift past the viewport. He had seen 300 years of combat, fought in 72 major battles, and lost count of the smaller skirmishes. His gray skin bore the scars of plasma burns and blade cuts, each one a story of survival. The Korath were known across the galaxy as the perfect warriors. They felt no fear. Their bodies simply did not produce the chemicals that caused panic or dread. In battle, they were cold, calculated, and unstoppable. The emergency summons from the Galactic Council had reached him 2 cycles ago. A new threat had emerged from dark space, something called the Scourge. They were parasitic machines mixed with organic matter, consuming everything in their path. 3 star systems had gone silent in the past month. The Council was afraid, and they were calling every warrior species to form a defense. Vexler as second officer, a younger Korath named Jexron, approached with a data tablet. The light from the screen reflected off his silver eyes. "Commander, we are approaching the rally point. 15 different species have sent fleets. The Council wants a unified command structure." "Expected," Vexler replied. His voice was deep and even, never rising with emotion. "Who leads this coalition?" "That is still being decided. But there is something unusual. A species we have never encountered before has volunteered ships. They call themselves humans. From a planet called Earth." Vexler pulled up the information on his screen. Humans were small, barely reaching 6 feet in height. Their world was a water planet rich in resources but unremarkable in the galactic census. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their technology was crude compared to the older civilizations. They had no special abilities, no enhanced strength, no natural armor or weapons. Why would such a primitive species volunteer for this fight? Vexler wondered aloud. Jexron shrugged. Perhaps they do not understand the danger. The Scourge destroyed the Velcran home fleet in less than an hour. The Velcran had shields that could withstand star-level radiation. The warship dropped out of faster-than-light speed. Before them stretched a massive gathering of vessels. Hundreds of ships from different worlds, each design unique. The Korath vessels were angular and dark, built for intimidation and function. Next to them floated the crystalline ships of the Lyrish, the bio-organic cruisers of the Thalmor, and dozens of other designs, and there, almost easy to miss among the larger vessels, were the human ships. They were metal constructs, painted in grays and whites, with hard angles and visible weapon batteries. Primitive rocket propulsion mixed with early fusion drives. They looked fragile. Vexler counted 20 human vessels in total. Each one was small, maybe 300 meters long. His flagship was over 2 kilometers. A single Korath warship could probably destroy their entire fleet. The summons came for all commanders to board the Council station for the strategy meeting. Vexler took a shuttle across the empty space, watching the human ships as he passed. Through their viewports he could see the crew moving around. They looked so soft, so vulnerable in their uniforms and equipment. The council chamber was a vast, circular room with a transparent dome showing the stars above. Representatives from each species stood at their designated positions. Vexler found his place among the other Korath commanders. General Zinther, the highest-ranking Korath in the sector, nodded to him in acknowledgement. The human delegation entered last. There were 3 of them. The leader was a man with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. His uniform was decorated with symbols that probably indicated rank. He moved with careful precision, not the swagger of warriors, but not the hesitation of cowards either. Behind him walked a woman with red hair tied back tightly, her green eyes constantly scanning the room. The third was an older man with gray in his hair and weathered skin. The lead human stepped to his species' platform and spoke. His voice was surprisingly steady. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. This is Lieutenant Amy Pierce, my tactical officer, and Admiral Frank Cole, Fleet Coordinator. Earth stands ready to assist in the defense against the Scourge." A ripple of what Vexler could only interpret as amusement went through some of the alien delegates. The Velcran representative, a massive creature with 4 arms and thick armored plates, let out a sound like grinding rocks. With respect, Captain Morrison, your vessels appear barely capable of system defense. The Scourge will tear through them like tissue paper. Morrison did not flinch. Probably. But we are here anyway. The briefing began. The Council's lead strategist, a lyrish named Crystalline Mind of Dawn, displayed holographic images of the Scourge attacks. The recordings were horrifying. The Scourge ships moved like living things, thousands of tentacle-like appendages reaching out to grab vessels and tear them apart. Once they latched onto a ship, they infected it, converting the crew and technology into more Scourge units. They adapt quickly, Crystalline Mind of Dawn explained. Weapons that work in one battle become useless in the next. They learn, evolve, and counter. Our projections show that if they are not stopped soon, they will reach the core worlds within 6 months. The strategy was simple because there was no alternative. The Coalition would meet the Scourge at the border systems and attempt to hold the line while evacuation efforts began for the most vulnerable colonies. Every ship would be needed. Every warrior would fight. After the meeting, Vexler found himself near the human delegation. Curiosity pulled him closer. Morrison was reviewing data on a handheld device while Amy Pierce spoke quietly with Admiral Cole. "Captain Morrison," Vexler said. The human looked up, meeting his eyes without fear. Interesting. Most species showed some physical reaction when first seeing a Korath. "I am Commander Vexler. I wish to understand why your species has volunteered for this fight." "You must know the danger." Morrison tucked the device away. "We know. We have seen the reports. Then why come? Your civilization is young. You could retreat to your home space and perhaps avoid the Scourge for years while the rest of us fight." "We could," Morrison agreed. "But that is not who we are. When something threatens innocent lives, we do not hide and hope someone else handles it." Vexler tilted his head. "My species, the Korath, we do not experience fear. Our biology makes us ideal warriors because we cannot panic or break under pressure. What is your species' advantage?" "I see none in your physical forms or technology." Morrison smiled, but there was something cold in it. "Fear is not weakness, Commander. It is fuel. We feel it every time we go into battle. And we fight anyway." Before Vexler could respond, alarms shrieked through the station. The holographic displays lit up with red warnings. A Scourge scouting force had appeared at the edge of the system. 12 vessels moving fast toward the rally point, every commander ran for their shuttles. Within minutes, Vexler was back on his bridge, and the Coalition fleet was moving to intercept. The human ships, despite their primitive drives, kept pace with the formation. The battle started at extreme range. The larger Coalition ships fired particle beams and plasma torpedoes. The Scourge vessels scattered, moving in patterns that seemed random but somehow avoided most of the incoming fire. Their return shots were precise. Targeting engines and weapon systems, Vexler commanded his ship with the efficiency of centuries of experience. His crew responded without hesitation. They damaged 2 Scourge vessels in the opening minutes. But then the enemy adapted. Their shields shifted frequencies. Weapons that had worked moments ago now splashed harmlessly against their hulls. The human ships moved into close range. Too close. Vexler watched on his tactical display as one human vessel, barely larger than a shuttle, flew directly into the path of a Scourge ship 3 times its size. The human ship opened fire with primitive kinetic weapons, actual metal projectiles fired at high velocity. The rounds tore into the Scourge hull, and then the human vessel rammed straight into the wound it had created. The explosion was massive. Both ships were destroyed instantly. "What madness is this?" Jexron muttered beside him, but it was effective. The Scourge ship was gone, and the explosion had damaged another enemy vessel nearby. The remaining human ships pressed the attack with similar aggression. They fought like they had nothing to lose, taking risks that no sane commander would authorize. One human pilot broadcasted on open channels as her ship's engines overloaded. "This is Lieutenant Karen White. My reactor is critical. I'm going for the big one." Her vessel accelerated toward the largest Scourge ship, engine flames growing brighter and brighter. She impacted just as the reactor exploded, tearing a hole in the Scourge vessel's side. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, all 12 Scourge ships were destroyed or disabled. The Coalition had lost 9 vessels. 4 of them were human. Back at the rally point, Vexler requested permission to board one of the surviving human ships. Permission was granted. The interior of the human vessel was cramped and utilitarian. Everything was metal and hard angles painted in neutral colors. The crew moved through narrow corridors with practiced efficiency. Captain Morrison met him in a small conference room. The human looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. Commander Vexler, what can I do for you? The Coalition fleet had been fighting the Scourge for 3 weeks now. Vexler's warship had seen action in 7 separate engagements. Each battle followed a similar pattern. The Scourge would appear in overwhelming numbers. The Coalition would fight back with superior technology and coordination, and somehow the humans would find a way to turn the tide through sheer audacity. But Vexler noticed something that disturbed him more with each passing day. After every battle, while other species celebrated victories or calculated losses in terms of resources and tactical positioning, the humans mourned. They held ceremonies for their dead. They spoke names aloud, lit candles, and stood in silence. They carved those names into metal plates that they welded to their ship hulls. The Korath did not mourn. When a warrior fell, their name was recorded in the archives, and their position was filled. Death was simply a fact of warfare. But humans treated each death like a wound that needed tending. Vexler found himself watching the humans more closely. He attended their tactical briefings when possible. He observed their crew during quiet moments. He tried to understand what drove them. Lieutenant Amy Pierce was the human he interacted with most frequently. She was sharp, efficient, and always prepared. Her tactical suggestions in Coalition meetings were often unconventional but effective. She had a way of thinking about problems that bypassed standard military doctrine entirely. During a joint planning session in the Coalition Command Center, Amy presented a plan that made Vexler's skin go cold. The Scourge were massing for a major offensive against a mining colony called Kepler Station. Intelligence suggested at least 40 Scourge vessels would participate in the attack. The Coalition could field 70 ships for the defense. Amy's holographic display showed the battlefield. The Scourge always focus on the largest threats first. They will target our capital ships immediately. If we send a diversionary force here, she pointed to a position far from Kepler Station, broadcasting loud signals and appearing to be a supply convoy, we can draw at least half their fleet away from the actual battle. General Zinther studied the display. A sound strategy. Which ships will form this diversionary force? Amy did not hesitate. 20 human vessels. We will broadcast supply manifests and fake distress calls. The Scourge will pursue us, thinking we are easy targets. That will give the main fleet time to fortify Kepler Station and prepare a proper defense. Vexler understood the problem immediately. If the Scourge pursue with 20 vessels, your diversionary force will be outnumbered and destroyed. Yes, Amy said simply. Estimated survival rate is less than 5%. But it will save Kepler Station and everyone on it. The room went silent. Other species representatives looked uncomfortable. The Velcrin commander spoke up. You cannot ask crews to accept such a mission. It is suicide. Captain Morrison, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward. We are not asking anyone. We are volunteering. Every human ship in the diversionary force knows the odds. We have already selected which vessels will go. How do you choose? Vexler asked. Morrison met his eyes. We asked who wanted to do it. More than 40 ships volunteered. We had to turn people away. The plan was approved because no one could offer a better alternative. Vexler requested permission to accompany the diversionary force with 2 Korath warships. Morrison seemed surprised but accepted. The 20 human ships and 2 Korath vessels set out 18 hours before the main attack. They positioned themselves in open space far from Kepler Station and began broadcasting. Fake messages about supply shortages. Distress calls claiming engine failures. Navigation data showing a route to undefended colonies. Vexler watched from his bridge as they waited. The human crews went about their duties with quiet efficiency. No panic, no chaos. They knew what was coming. Amy Pierce was on Morrison's ship, the Defiant, coordinating the operation. Her voice came through the communication channel, calm and steady. All ships maintain formation. Make sure your broadcasts are at maximum strength. We need to be impossible to ignore. One of the human captains responded. Defiant, this is the Ranger. Just want to say, it has been an honor serving with you all. The honor is ours, Ranger, Morrison replied. See you on the other side. The Scourge appeared on sensors exactly on schedule. 23 vessels moving at high speed toward the diversionary force. Vexler felt that strange sensation in his chest again. His hands moved over his command console, preparing weapons and shields, but something inside him was screaming that this was wrong. They should run? They should retreat, but the humans did not run. They adjusted their formation and prepared to fight. The Scourge opened fire at extreme range. Green energy beams lanced through space. The human ships scattered, returning fire with everything they had. Missiles, kinetic rounds, plasma torpedoes. The Korath warships added their superior weapons to the barrage. 3 human ships were destroyed in the first minute. The Scourge adapted quickly, their shields shifting to counter the incoming attacks. They moved like a pack of predators, coordinating their fire to overwhelm one target at a time. Vexler, as tactical officer, called out positions and damage reports. The numbers were bad and getting worse. But every minute the diversionary force held the Scourge here was another minute for the main fleet to prepare at Kepler Station. A human ship called the Horizon lost its engines. The captain, a woman named Lisa Grant, broadcast calmly. Horizon to fleet? We are dead in space. Reactor still functional. We are going to overload and take as many of them with us as possible. It has been a privilege. The ship's reactor began to spike on sensors. The Scourge, recognizing the danger, tried to destroy the Horizon before it could detonate. But 3 other human vessels moved to intercept the incoming fire. Using their own hulls as shields, the Horizon exploded. The blast consumed 2 Scourge ships completely and crippled a third. The 3 human ships that had protected her were gone as well. Vexler watched his display as the battle continued. Human vessels were falling one after another, but each one took at least 1 Scourge ship with them. They fought with a desperation and creativity that he had never witnessed. One ship, engines failing, used its gravity drive to slingshot around a nearby moon and rammed directly into a Scourge vessel's bridge section. Another deliberately flew into a debris field, using the wreckage as cover while its crew manually fired torpedoes. Through blown-out hull sections, Morrison's voice remained steady through the entire battle, coordinating what remained of his force. Defiant to all ships. Kepler Station just confirmed the main fleet is in position. We did it. Mission accomplished. All vessels, survival is now the priority. Break formation and scatter. Try to make it back to friendly lines. But there was nowhere to run. The Scourge had them surrounded. Only 6 human ships remained functional, and all of them were damaged. Both Korath warships were still operational but running low on ammunition. Vexler made a decision. Human vessels, this is Commander Vexler. Form up behind my ship. We will break through their line and cover your retreat. Commander, you will not survive that maneuver, Jexron said quietly beside him. Then we will not survive, Vexler replied. The words felt strange in his mouth. The Korath did not think about survival or death in these terms. But something had changed in him. The Korath warships accelerated toward the thickest concentration of Scourge vessels, firing everything they had. The human ships followed in their wake. The Scourge focused their fire on the larger Korath vessels, and in that moment of distraction, the humans slipped through the gap. Vexler's shields were failing. Hull breaches on multiple decks. But they were through. The human ships accelerated away at maximum speed. Morrison's voice came through, rough with emotion. Commander Vexler, we owe you our lives. Thank you. Vexler's ship and the other Korath vessel managed to escape as well, though both were heavily damaged. The battle was over. 14 human ships destroyed, hundreds of crew members dead. But Kepler Station was saved, and the main fleet had destroyed the Scourge offensive with minimal losses. Back at the Coalition base, Vexler visited the human medical bay. Amy Pierce was there, her arm in a sling from where she had been thrown against a console during the battle. She was going through a list of names, marking which crew members had been recovered and which were confirmed dead. "Lieutenant Pierce?" Vexler said. She looked up, her green eyes red from crying, but her jaw set firm. "Commander, thank you for what you did out there. You saved our remaining ships." "I do not understand," Vexler said. He realized his hands were shaking slightly. He clasped them behind his back to hide it. 14 ships. Hundreds of dead. How can you continue? How can you keep fighting after such losses? Amy set down her tablet. Because they chose this. Every single person on those ships knew what they were volunteering for. They died so that 15,000 civilians on Kepler Station could live. That means something to us. Their sacrifice means something, but you feel pain from their deaths. I can see it. Why accept missions that cause such pain? Because the alternative is worse, Amy said quietly. The pain reminds us that they mattered, that their lives had value. If we did not feel pain at their loss, what would that make us? The intelligence report arrived during the night cycle. Vexler was reviewing maintenance schedules when the emergency channel activated. General Zinthar face appeared on the display, and even though Korath faces rarely showed emotion, Vexler could sense something was deeply wrong. "All commanders, report to the council chamber immediately. Priority Alpha." The chamber was already crowded when Vexler arrived. Every species representative was present, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. The holographic display in the center showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. A massive red cloud was spreading from the outer rim toward the core, crystalline mind of dawn. The Lyrish strategist activated the display. The red cloud moved in simulation, consuming system after system. "Our deep space probes have detected the main Scourge fleet." It is not a fleet. It is an armada. Thousands of vessels, perhaps tens of thousands. They are moving toward the Crucible Gap. The Crucible Gap was the only direct route to the core worlds. A narrow channel of space between two massive nebulas, it was a natural choke point. If the Scourge passed through it, they would have access to the most densely populated sectors of the galaxy. Trillions of lives. How long do we have? The Velcrin commander asked. If they maintain current speed, they will reach the gap in 4 days. The evacuation of the core worlds would take weeks at minimum. We cannot evacuate everyone in time. Then we hold them at the gap, Captain Morrison said. He had been standing quietly near the human delegation, but now he stepped forward. We put every ship we have in that passage and we hold. A Thalmor representative, its translator struggling with its complex vocalizations, responded. The projections show the Scourge outnumber us 50 to 1. Holding that position would be suicide. We must retreat, form a defensive line further in, buy time for evacuations. That line would be even weaker, Morrison argued. And we would give up the natural advantage of the gap? That narrow space limits how many ships they can bring to bear at once? It is our best chance. Best chance of what? The Velcrin commander demanded. Dying gloriously? We are warriors, Captain Morrison, not fools. We know when a battle cannot be won. Morrison's jaw tightened. Then we buy time. The gap is 8 light minutes across at its narrowest point. If we hold for 48 hours, the emergency evacuation corridors can clear. Billions of lives, Commander. 48 hours. The debate continued for hours. Every species except humanity argued for retreat. The mathematics were undeniable. The coalition fleet numbered 700 ships. Intelligence estimated the Scourge Armada at over 30,000 vessels. There was no scenario where the coalition could hold the gap indefinitely. Admiral Cole, the older human who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. His voice was rough with age and experience. My species has a saying. We did not come this far to only come this far. Earth committed its fleet to this fight knowing we might not return. But we will not abandon those who cannot defend themselves. The human fleet will hold the Crucible Gap, with or without the coalition. The vote was called. Species after species chose retreat. Their logic was sound. Preserve forces, establish a defensive line further in, accept the loss of some colonies to save the majority. Cold calculus. When the Korath vote came, General Zinner stood silent for a long moment. Then he looked directly at Vexler. Commander Vexler has spent more time with the humans than any of us. What is your recommendation? Vexler felt every eye in the chamber turn to him. That sensation in his chest was worse now. It had been growing stronger with each battle, each human sacrifice he witnessed. His hands wanted to shake again. He forced them still. The humans are insane, he said slowly. They fight battles they cannot win. They volunteer for missions that will kill them. They feel fear and pain and grief, and they walk toward death anyway. By every logical measure, we should retreat. He paused. The cold feeling spread through his entire body now. He recognized it finally. It was dread. The certainty of doom. The knowledge that something terrible was coming and could not be avoided. But I have watched them fight. I have watched them die. And I have learned something. They do not fight because they think they will win. They fight because not fighting is unacceptable to them. Because some things matter more than survival. He met General Zinthor's eyes. The Korath fleet will stand with humanity at the Crucible Gap. The vote ended. Only the humans in Korath would defend the gap. Every other species would retreat to secondary positions. The coalition was effectively dissolved. Captain Morrison approached Vexler after the chamber emptied. You did not have to do this, Commander. This is not your fight alone? Perhaps not, Vexler replied. But I am beginning to understand why it is yours. The fleet moved to the Crucible Gap, 112 human vessels, 38 Korath warships. Against an armada that blotted out the stars, the gap itself was beautiful in a deadly way. The nebulas on either side glowed with purple and blue light, their gases dense enough to block sensors and weapons. The passage between them was the only clear route. 8 light minutes wide, 12 light minutes long. The perfect killing field, the combined human and Korath fleets set up defensive positions. Human ships clustered around the Korath warships, using the larger vessels' shields and firepower as anchor points. They scattered mines throughout the passage. They established firing solutions and fallback positions. They prepared every trick and trap they could imagine. Vexler walked through his ship, observing the crew. Korath warriors had always been efficient, but now there was something else in their movements, hesitation, uncertainty. They had never fought a battle knowing they would die. It was changing them. He visited the Defiant at Morrison's invitation. The human crew was preparing in their own way. Some wrote letters that would be transmitted back to Earth if they failed. Others gathered in small groups, talking quietly. A few prayed to their various gods. Amy Pierce was checking weapon systems when Vexler found her. She looked up and managed a tired smile. Commander, come to see how the doomed prepare? Something like that, Vexler admitted. Lieutenant, can I ask you a question? Of course. Do you believe in an afterlife? Some place where consciousness continues after death? Amy considered this. Some of us do. Some do not. I am honestly not sure. But I think either way, what we do here matters. If there is something after, we will face it knowing we did the right thing. If there is nothing, then these next 48 hours are our last chance to make our lives mean something. A young human pilot approached them. He was very young, maybe 20 years old, with nervous energy in every movement. Lieutenant Pierce, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to give this to Commander Vexler. He held out a small pendant on a chain. It was a simple silver disc with a symbol Vexler did not recognize. What is this? Vexler asked. My lucky charm, the young pilot said. His name tag read Danny Fisher. My grandmother gave it to me. I want you to have it. For after what? After all this is over. Someone should make it out to tell the story. Might as well be you. Vexler took the pendant. It was warm from being worn against Danny's skin. I cannot promise I will survive either. I know, Danny said with a shrug. But you have got a better chance than me. And somebody should remember us, right? The Scourge arrived early. Sensors detected them 6 hours ahead of schedule. The edge of their armada appeared on long-range scans like a dark stain spreading across space. Ship after ship after ship, an endless tide of death. Morrison's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Captain Morrison. You know what we are here to do? 48 hours. That is all we need. 48 hours and those evacuation ships clear the core worlds. 48 hours and billions of innocent people live. We can do this. We will do this. For everyone we are sworn to protect. For everyone who cannot protect themselves. For humanity. For the Korath. For every species that chooses life over death. Hold the line. The response from the human ships was immediate. Not words. A song. They were singing something, their voices joining together across the communication channels. Vexler did not understand the words, but the melody was defiant and strong. The Korath ships responded in their own way. A deep, resonant tone that their war singers produced. The two sounds mixed together in the void. The Scourge fleet entered the gap. The first wave was only 500 ships, testing the defenses. They spread out across the passage, moving in complex patterns. All ships, Amy Pierce's voice was calm and professional. Hold fire until they reach the mine line. Let them think we are afraid. The Scourge vessels advanced. They reached the invisible line where thousands of mines waited. The fleet opened fire. Every weapon on every ship discharged at once. Missiles and mines and particle beams and plasma. Torpedoes filled the space between the fleets with light and death. The first wave of Scourge ships vanished in a wall of explosions. Debris scattered across the gap. For a moment, there was silence. Then the second wave came, larger, faster, thousands of ships, and the battle for the Crucible Gap began. Vexler commanded his ship through the chaos. Targets appeared and disappeared on sensors faster than he could track. His crew fired continuously, their weapons overheating and being replaced by backup. Hour 12. The human fleet was down to 87 functional ships. The Korath had lost 4 warships completely and another 9 were operating at reduced capacity. The Scourge kept coming. Wave after wave, an endless tide that adapted to every tactic, evolved past every defense, and pressed forward with machine determination. Vexler S. Bridge was thick with smoke from damaged systems. His tactical display showed the entire battlefield, and the picture was grim. The defensive line was holding, but barely. Human ships were plugging gaps with their own hulls. Buying seconds of time with their lives, a human destroyer called the Valiant lost its main engines during a close-range exchange with a Scourge heavy cruiser. The captain, a woman named Helen Park, broadcast calmly even as her ship drifted helplessly into the enemy formation. Valiant to fleet, we are done for? Overloading reactor now? Get clear. 4 Scourge vessels surrounded the Valiant, preparing to tear it apart for resources. Captain Park waited until they were as close as possible, then detonated her reactor. The explosion took all 4 enemy ships and created a temporary gap in the Scourge line. 3 human fighters dove through that gap and took out a Scourge carrier that had been coordinating attack patterns. Morrison's voice came over the fleet channel. Well done, Valiant. We will remember. Hour 18. Vexler's own ship had taken heavy damage. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Shield generators running at 40%. But they were still fighting. Still holding, he watched his tactical officer Jexron working frantically at his console. The younger Korath's movements were sharp and nervous, afraid. All the Korath were afraid now. The biological certainty that they could not feel fear had been broken by watching humans die with such purpose. Now they understood what fear meant, and they had to fight through it just like the humans did. "Commander," Jexron called out. "Scourge supercarrier entering the gap. It is massive. Bigger than anything we have seen before." The tactical display showed the new contact. The vessel was 10 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and launching smaller craft by the hundreds. A command ship. If it reached the center of the battle, it could coordinate the entire Scourge fleet with terrifying efficiency. "All ships, priority target," Morrison announced. "We need to bring down that supercarrier before it reaches weapons range." The problem was that thousands of Scourge vessels were between the Allied fleet and the supercarrier. Going after it meant pushing deep into enemy territory. It meant suicide. Defiant to all human vessels. "We are going in. Who is with me?" Every single human ship responded. They regrouped into a spearhead formation with the Defiant at the tip. Morrison was planning to drive straight through the Scourge fleet to reach the supercarrier. Vexler made his decision instantly. "Korath fleet, form up with the humans." "We go together. Commander, the odds," Jexron started. "I know the odds," Vexler cut him off. "But this is where we are needed." The combined spearhead drove forward. Human ships on the outer edges absorbed enemy fire, their shields flaring and failing. Korath warships provided heavy firepower, their weapons carving holes in the Scourge formations. They pushed deeper and deeper into the enemy fleet. Ships fell constantly. A human frigate took a direct hit to its reactor and vanished in a flash of light. A Korath cruiser was swarmed by dozens of small Scourge attack craft and torn apart. But the spearhead kept moving forward. Amy Pierce's voice was directing the attack from the Defiant. "Target the carrier's launch bays. If we can stop it from deploying fighters, we reduce their coordination advantage." The human ships focused their fire on the supercarrier's massive hangar openings. Missiles streaked across space and detonated inside the carrier's hull. Secondary explosions bloomed along its side. But it was not enough. The carrier kept coming, kept launching attack craft. Hour 24. Halfway to the goal. The fleet was bleeding ships at an unsustainable rate. 43 human vessels remained. 19 Korath warships. And they still had not reached the supercarrier. A young human pilot, the one who had given Vexler his lucky pendant, appeared on the tactical display. Danny Fisher's small fighter was damaged, trailing atmosphere from a hull breach. His voice was steady despite the circumstances. "Captain Morrison, my fighter is done. Engines failing, but I have got a clear shot at one of the carrier's shield generators if I go in fast." "Danny, negative," Morrison said firmly. "Return to the Defiant for emergency recovery." "Sir, with respect, we both know I will not make it back. My life support is failing, but I can take out that shield generator." "That is worth something." There was a pause. Vexler could hear the pain in Morrison's voice when he finally replied. "Confirmed, Danny. Make it count." "Always do, sir." "Tell my family I love them." Fisher out. Vexler watched on sensors as Danny's fighter accelerated toward the supercarrier. Scourge weapons tracked the small craft, filling space around it with energy fire. But Danny flew through it all, his fighter dancing between shots with desperate skill. He reached the shield generator and his fighter impacted at full speed. The shield generator exploded. A section of the supercarrier's defensive screen collapsed. And in that moment of vulnerability, every human and Korath ship in range fired everything they had at the exposed section of hull. The supercarrier's armor cracked. Atmosphere vented into space. Internal explosions rippled through its structure. But it was still functional, still fighting. R30. The battle had become chaos. Ships from both sides were scattered throughout the gap. The defensive line no longer existed. It was just a massive brawl with no front lines, no clear positions. Just survival and death mixing in equal measure. Morrison's ship, the Defiant, was crippled. Vexler could see on sensors that the human vessel had lost main power. Emergency systems only. Life support failing. The ship was drifting. "Captain Morrison, this is Vexler. Transmit your crew. My ship will recover them." "Negative, Commander," Morrison replied. His voice was weak. "Injured, probably. My crew stays with me. But thank you for the offer. What are you planning?" "We still have navigation, and our reactor is intact." The Defiant is going to do what she was built to do. Protect people. Vexler understood immediately. Morrison was going to ram the supercarrier. Captain, you do not have to do this. There are other ways. No, there are not. And you know it. This is the only way to guarantee that carrier goes down. Morrison paused. Commander Vexler, it has been an honor serving with you. Tell Earth we did our duty. The Defiant's engines flickered to life. Emergency power only, but enough. The ship began accelerating toward the supercarrier. Amy Pierce's voice joined Morrison's on the channel. All human ships. This is the Defiant. We are making our final run. It has been a privilege to serve with you all. The human crew began singing, the same song from when the battle started. Their voices were fewer now, weakened by exhaustion and injury, but no less defiant. Vexler wanted to scream at them to stop, to turn back, to find another way, but his voice caught in his throat. The dread that had been building in him for weeks finally found its full expression. He was terrified. Terrified of what the humans were about to do. Terrified of losing them. Terrified of the cost of this courage. The Defiant accelerated faster. 0.1 light speed. 0.2. 0.3. The supercarrier realized the danger and tried to maneuver, but it was too large, too slow. Scourge ships moved to intercept the Defiant, but human fighters threw themselves in the way, blocking shots with their own fragile hulls. Fear is fuel, Morrison said softly. We are just burning everything we have left. The Defiant impacted the supercarrier at 0.4 light speed. The explosion was like a star being born. White light filled the gap. The supercarrier split in half, its massive structure unable to withstand the relativistic impact. Secondary explosions tore through both halves. In seconds, the most powerful Scourge vessel in the battle was reduced to debris and radiation. The shockwave from the explosion caught a dozen nearby Scourge ships and tore them apart. The enemy formation fell into chaos, their command structure disrupted, and in that moment of chaos, something changed. The remaining human ships, instead of falling back or mourning, pressed the attack with renewed fury. They dove into the disorganized Scourge fleet, exploiting every gap, every moment of confusion. The Korath fleet followed. Vexler heard himself shouting orders, his voice raw with emotion he had never known he could feel. His ship drove forward, weapons firing continuously, shields taking hit after hit. Around him, Korath warriors fought with a desperation that came not from fearlessness, but from fear transformed into purpose. R36. The tide was turning. The Scourge were falling back, regrouping. The destruction of their supercarrier had cost them their coordination advantage. The human and Korath ships, though vastly outnumbered, were fighting with such intensity that the Scourge could not maintain their formations, but the cost was terrible. Only 21 human ships remained functional. 8 Korath warships. Thousands of crew members dead. The gap was filled with debris from both sides, R40. The Scourge launched one final massive assault. Every remaining ship in their armada pushed forward at once. It was overwhelming. The defenders could not possibly hold, but they did not need to hold forever. Just 8 more hours. 8 more. The silence after the battle was worse than the noise during it. Vexler stood on the bridge of his damaged warship, watching the debris field through the viewport. Pieces of ships drifted past. Human vessels. Korath vessels. Scourge vessels. All mixed together in death, no longer enemies or allies, just wreckage and memory. His hands were still shaking. They had been shaking for hours now, and he could not make them stop. The dread that had filled him during the battle had not left. Instead, it had transformed into something heavier. Grief, perhaps. Or exhaustion. Or the simple weight of understanding what had truly happened in these past 48 hours. Jexron approached him quietly. The younger Korath's face was haunted. Commander, damage control reports we have lost 62% of our crew. The ship can limp to a repair station, but we are no longer combat capable. Vexler nodded slowly. And the other Korath ships? Similar casualties across the fleet? We have confirmed destruction of 33 Korath warships. 5 remain operational, including ours. 33 ships. Thousands of Korath warriors. His people had always recorded such numbers with clinical precision. But now, knowing those numbers represented individuals who had chosen to face their fear and fight anyway, the weight of it pressed down on him like a physical force. The humans? He asked, though he already knew the answer would hurt. 16 ships remain from their original 112. Casualty estimates are over 90%. They are requesting permission to hold a memorial service in 3 hours. Vexler looked at Danny Fisher's pendant, which he had kept in his pocket throughout the entire battle. The silver disc was warm from being near his body, a lucky charm that had not saved its original owner but had somehow survived when so much else had not. The communication channel activated. Admiral Cole's face appeared, looking ancient and exhausted. Commander Vexler, Captain Morrison is dead. The Defiant was destroyed with all hands. As senior human officer, I am assuming command of what remains of our fleet. We need to coordinate recovery efforts. Understood, Admiral, Vexler replied. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. My condolences for Captain Morrison. He was a remarkable leader. He was, Cole said quietly. So were all of them. The recovery efforts took days. Search and rescue teams scoured the debris field for survivors. They found some. Not many, but some. Life pods with crew members who had ejected before their ships exploded. Sections of vessels that had maintained hull integrity. Small pockets of hope in an ocean of loss. Amy Pierce was one of the survivors. Her ship had taken catastrophic damage, but she had been in a reinforced section that held together. When the rescue team brought her aboard Vexler's vessel, she was barely conscious, suffering from broken ribs and severe burns. But she was alive. Vex single quotes Lar visited her in the medical bay 2 days after the battle. She was sitting up in bed, her torso wrapped in healing bandages, her red hair tangled and dirty. She looked up when he entered and managed a weak smile. Commander, did we do it? Did they make it? Yes, Vexler said, sitting in the chair beside her bed. The evacuation ships cleared the core worlds. 14 billion lives were saved. The Scourge have retreated to regroup. We bought the time needed. Amy's eyes closed. A single tear ran down her cheek. Good, that is good. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Vexler spoke. I need to tell you something, Lieutenant. Throughout this battle, I felt something I have never experienced before. My species, we do not feel fear. It is a biological impossibility for us. Or it was? Amy opened her eyes. Watching your people fight, watching them die, something changed in me. In all the Korath who fought beside you, we began to feel what you feel. The dread, the terror, the certainty of death. And for the first time in my 300 years of life, I understood what courage truly means. Amy was quiet, listening. You asked me once why I did not understand your tactics. Your willingness to sacrifice. I thought it was madness. But now I see it differently. You fight not because you do not feel fear, but despite being consumed by it. That is what makes it brave. That is what makes it matter. We are not special, Commander, Amy said softly. We are just people trying to do the right thing. No, Vexler shook his head. You are extraordinary. Every single one of you. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of having fought beside you. The memorial service was held in the largest cargo bay that still had atmosphere. Every surviving human gathered there, along with representatives from the Korath ships. The bay was decorated simply. Candles in zero-gravity containers floated in the air. A holographic display showed the names of every human who had died. There were so many names. They scrolled continuously, and it took almost an hour for them all to pass. Admiral Cole spoke first. His voice was rough but steady. We came to this fight knowing the odds. We came anyway. Not because we thought we would win, but because walking away was not who we are. Every person whose name appears here made that same choice. They chose to stand, to fight, to sacrifice. And because of that choice, billions of people are alive today who would otherwise be dead. He paused, looking at the floating names. We are not a fearless species. We are afraid all the time. Afraid of death, afraid of pain, afraid of loss? But we have learned that fear is not weakness. It is fuel. It is what makes our choices meaningful. When you do something despite being terrified, that is when it truly matters. Amy Pierce stood to speak next, wincing from her injuries. Captain Morrison said something to me once. He said that fear is fuel, and we are just burning everything we have. That is what they all did. They burned everything they had to protect people they would never meet. Civilians they would never know. Children who will grow up safe because of their sacrifice. She looked directly at Vexler. And they taught our Korath allies what it means to choose courage. That is a legacy worth dying for. When the service ended, Vexler found himself standing alone in the cargo bay, watching the names continue to scroll. Morrison, Jake, Pierce, Danny Fisher, Stone, Rachel, Park, Helen, Grant, Lisa, on and on. Each one a story cut short. Each one a life given freely. He pulled out Danny's pendant and held it up to the light. The young pilot had said someone should remember them. Someone should tell the story. Vexler understood now that this was his responsibility. His purpose. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council reconvened. The species that had retreated returned, some ashamed, others defensive. They had established secondary defensive lines and prepared for a scourge breakthrough that never came. The stand at the Crucible Gap had changed the entire course of the war. Vexler was called to address the council. He stood at the central podium, looking at the representatives of dozens of species, all waiting to hear his report. I served for 300 years before I met humanity, he began. In that time, I fought in 72 major battles. I was decorated for valor countless times. I was considered one of the finest warriors of my species. But I never truly understood what it meant to be a warrior until I stood beside humans in combat. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The Korath do not feel fear. This has always been our greatest strength. We walk into battle without hesitation, without doubt. But I realize now that this is not strength. It is emptiness. True strength is feeling fear and choosing to act anyway. Humanity taught me this. They fight while terrified. They volunteer for suicide missions while their hands shake. They sing songs while flying towards certain death. And they do it not because they are superhuman or enhanced or special in any biological way. They do it because they have decided that some things are more important than survival. Vexler looked at the empty space where the human delegation should have been. Only Admiral Cole remained standing quietly in the back. The rest were gone, dead in the gap. 96 human vessels were destroyed at the Crucible Gap, thousands of crew members dead. They knew the odds. They knew they would likely not survive. And they went anyway. Because 14 billion civilians needed 48 hours to evacuate, and humanity decided those lives were worth dying for. The council chamber was absolutely silent. I felt dread for the first time fighting alongside humanity. Real, consuming, terrifying dread. The certainty that we would fail, that we would die, that everything would be lost. And in that dread, I learned what courage actually means. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite fear destroying you from within. The Korath who fought at the Gap are changed. We can feel fear now. We can feel dread. And we have never been more grateful for any sensation in our entire history. Because now we can truly choose to be brave. Now our sacrifices have meaning. He pulled Danny's pendant from his pocket and held it up. A young human pilot gave this to me before the battle. He said someone should survive to tell the story, to remember them. I intend to honor that request. Vexler's voice grew stronger. I propose that the Galactic Council establish a permanent memorial at the Crucible Gap, a monument to every human and Korath warrior who died there. And I propose that the inscription read these words, "They were afraid. They stayed anyway." The vote was unanimous. The memorial would be built months later. After the scourge had been pushed back and a fragile peace established, Vexler returned to Korath space. He had been called before.